welcome to episode 12 of the How to Become a Personal Trainer video series. This is where you learn how to become a good personal trainer to real busy people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way up. Glad you are with us. In this episode, we're going to talk about coaching movements. After all, this is really where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So how to teach someone good movement, how to teach them the exercises that we want them to do, how to teach them to squat or deadlift or row or do a push-up or whatever the exercise is. So today I'm going to show you how to break down any movement into its parts so that you can show someone how to do it as simply as you can. And if someone has never performed these movements, simplicity is the key. It's everything. Think of something you don't know how to do. You know how to squat and deadlift and do all that, but do you know how to fly an airplane or analyze an options trade or change a timing belt? That's where your client is before you teach them. It's easy for you, but for them, it's like changing a timing belt. And for someone who's never really exercised and is nervous on top of that, it's like changing a timing belt with nothing but a spoon in their hand. So we're going to use a box squat as an example today, and this is the squat variation that we almost always start people out with. Okay, so we're going to get to that in a second. But before we start, I want to emphasize something really important, and that's in order to coach and teach something, you need to be able to perform it with a high level of technical proficiency. I have a rule that I never program anything that I can't demonstrate extremely well. And that doesn't mean you need to be able to squat 400 pounds to teach someone to squat, but it does mean that you need to be able to perform every one of the squat variations you are programming for people with near perfect form. And of course, this goes for every single movement, exercise, or variation that you are programming, okay? So I'm gonna get set up for a box squat, and I will be right back. Okay, so step one is figuring out the single most important piece of the movement you are teaching them. Notice how I said single most important. And this is what you're going to emphasize to them above everything else. And the reason for that is that you can only give a new client one thing to focus on during a set. Just one thing. And this goes not only for new clients, but for most clients, including yourself. Even if everything around them is falling apart, you just want them to focus on that one thing. Unless, and this is crucial, they are doing something that can hurt them. If that's the case, then you absolutely correct that right away, okay? Keeping a client out of harm's way is always the number one consideration. So since we're going over the squat, for example, I always emphasize that the hips move back first, okay? This activates all the muscles in the posterior chain, takes pressure off the knees. And keep that focus in mind, because sometimes, especially again, when you're working with a newer and an inexperienced client, you may see like 10 things during an exercise that you want to fix. Forget all of it except the one main thing. If the other stuff isn't going to hurt them right then, there's going to be time to fix that stuff later. And many times, nailing that one main thing is going to make some or all of that other stuff better. So now that I have that in mind, I'm going to get them set up correctly, and this is really important. So often people just start moving and they don't realize how wonky their setup is. You'll see people squat and they just kind of get their feet out and they're just doing stuff. And a bad setup means that they have no chance of their form being good. And that means they have no chance of their set being good. So get that set up before they start moving. Before they do the movement also, it's important that you show them how to do it first and narrate the movement from setup to finish. And again, emphasize the one thing you want them to focus on. And a good rule on how to coach these things is do this, don't do that, do this. In other words, if we're talking about the squat, again, it's push your hips back, don't just drop down, push your hips back. Okay, you can even say don't do this because of something, give them a little context. Push your hips back, don't just drop down because it's going to hurt your knees, move your hips back. So in the case of the box squat, to show you an example of how to narrate that movement all the way through, I'm going to show them how I set up. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the corner of the box. My feet are even. I'm standing up nice and tall. I'm keeping my eyes looking straight ahead. Okay? Notice I'm giving them these kinds of cues during the setup because they're not moving. They can kind of go through that checklist before they actually do anything. Now that they're standing nice and tall, again, this is where I'm going to focus on that one thing. So I'm going to push my hips back, get all the way down to that box, come right back up. Boom. And again, I want you to move your hips back. I don't want you to just drop down. I want you to move your hips back, go down to that box, come back up. Okay? So that's kind of narrating that movement all the way through. Okay, so now they're going to do the move. And again, rule 1, correct anything that will hurt them, but otherwise forget about everything about that movement except for your one thing, which in my case is moving those hips back. Okay? So if for example, if I see a client do this, it's obviously not a good squat, but I'm going to forget about the upper back. I'm going to forget about those knees caving in. I'm going to forget about all that. I'm going to forget about their head looking straight at the ground. As silly as all that seems, that's not the way we want to squat, but I'm going to focus on them pushing their hips back. There's going to be time to correct all that other stuff. And so I'm just going to say, all right, I'll stop them. I'm going to say, push your hips back, get down in the box, come back up. Make sure pushing your hips back is the first thing we want to do. We don't want to drop down. Again, we want to push our hips back, okay? So if they do that, that's where we want to focus. Yeah, and you want to make sure they have that part down before you give them any other cues. And again, repeat the process at that point in your mind. Like once they get that down, like if they are pushing their hips back, but their knees are then caving in and they're rounding over again, I'm going to think, all right, what's the next thing I want them to focus on? Okay? I want them to focus on keeping their knees out. It could be anything, okay? So then I'm going to start that whole process over. I'm going to say, all right, now that you're moving hips back first, I want you to concentrate on keeping your knees out, okay? So push back, open your knees up, come back up. Don't push back and then let your knees cave in. Push back, let your knees push out, come back up. Yeah, so you're kind of repeating the process in your mind of which cues are most important. Now that they have the first thing down, they're going to focus on the next thing. As Anna from Frozen taught us, we just need to focus on the next right thing. And we're going to do that all the way through the movement until they do it pretty well. So here are a few other things to think about when you're coaching a new movement. First, you want to be as sequential as you can when going over the movement. Push your hips back first, knees come out, that kind of thing. Second, have a few different cues for the same movement in your repertoire. You never know which one a client is going to get. So for example, with pushing their hips back, I can say something like, I want you to put your butt right against that wall right there. Boom, okay? They might get that. I can give them, I can say, put your hands right here, slide your hands down your leg, boom, like that. There's a few other, hip hinge cues we can use, okay? You can talk about the stick RDL or whatever. But have a few different cues in your repertoire because, again, you don't know what a client's going to connect with and what's going to work with them. Number 3, understand where the client is in their understanding of the exercise and their need to understand more. In other words, in the case of a squat, most clients aren't going to need to know a ton about foot placement or grip width on the bar of a back squat or experimenting with their toe position. And that's because most of your clients aren't powerlifters who are trying to squeeze out every additional ounce on the bar that they can when they're squatting. If they are, great, and you can go there with those cues, but only coach a client to the level they need to be to get the results they're looking for. Otherwise, you're confusing them. It's more than they need, it's more than they want. And number 4, obviously, always be encouraged and positive in your coaching. The truth is that some clients are going to forget things. Some clients are going to get it right away and you're going to be able to move them along. It's going to be great, and some clients won't. And it can be really frustrating to have to show someone something for the 50th time. But understand they are doing the best they can, or else they wouldn't be coming to you, and that's what just has to be done. That's understanding, as frustrating as it may be. And another thing, it never hurts to get coaching yourself. If you can't do that, watch videos of people being coached. Watch other personal trainers and how they coach movements. Ask questions. Email people questions. When I started out, I asked other trainers if I could just watch their sessions. I emailed people all the time that I found online or in forums. Sometimes they didn't answer, but sometimes they did. And I learned a ton that way. And I always made it a point to tell other personal trainers that were coming along, like if you have any questions, if you just want to talk, let me know. I want you to learn these things. It's important. How to coach these movements is really it's so important to being a good personal trainer and in getting people out of pain and in teaching people just kind of the joys of fitness and how good it can feel when you do it right. So that's all we got for today. Again, if you have any questions or comments, put them in any questions, comments, whatever, put them in the comments. I'll answer them. I'll answer every question I've gotten. I have so far, and I will continue to do that. Please like and subscribe to these videos. We're trying to really get the fitness industry to make a little bit of a shift to what really matters when we're trying to coach people and help people. So that's great. Have a great day. See you soon. Bye.